So at the beginning of the semester, we talked about web design a little bit in terms of what that has to do with visual communication, and I use this site here, the Swiss Army Man site, to demonstrate to you a couple of ideas. One of which being this concept of affordance. Well, that comes from this designer by the name of Skip Rutledge, who talks about a number of axioms of communication. I'm going to go to the class website to show you where you could find these things. If you go to schedule, go to this week, the 24th or 28th of February, and you see quiet structure and axioms. Let's talk about quiet structure first here briefly. This is an old post. It goes back, as you can see, to the 5th of July in 2007. But there's some ideas here that Rutledge talks about that I think still apply, not all of them necessarily. What he does within this article, and I'm going to ask you to read it, is he gives a comparison between CNN.com and USAtoday.com's websites, and they've changed considerably since then. In fact, they've changed considerably within the last 4 or 5 weeks as I track how these things go through and evolve and see what's going on with them. But he makes an argument in terms of quiet structure versus loud structure. And you can follow that argument through here. You see the number of graphic structural indicators, the graduated blues here going into the white, the extra borders, all the colored dots that at one point had some type of a code to them, the images over text, the multiple layers, all kinds of things going on. And he gets more into some practical examples of what he's talking about in terms of loud structure, what we're seeing here, where it's very vertical, as opposed to quiet structure, where we have more of a horizontal, natural left-right read and digestion, I guess, of the material that's out there. Then he gets down into the grid and the white space issues. An inconsistent grid versus an equidistal grid, or a consistent grid as he calls it. This is what he gets into in terms of quiet structure that way. If you removed all of the content out of CNN's site at the time, this is what you're left with. There's still a number of graphic boxes, compartmentalizations of different types of information that you see, the bulleted list, that kind of thing. But compare that to USA Today's rather loud background. I think you start to get the point there. So if you get a chance, give this a read. You know where to find it there on the site. I'm going to go through, I pulled up a number of news websites. If you see here, I've got NPR, CNN, CBS, NBC, Fox, and so on, and PBS, to kind of apply what it is that he's talking about. And out of all of these, NPR really is the one that follows through with the whole concept of the quiet structure. First off, within this almost equidistal distances here in between the boxes, the background versus the foreground, the background going about 30% gray on that, and with the white over that, and you see they're horizontal as they go. They're not anchored by the photo follows. They're anchored more by the headline as it goes. So it's interesting to go through and see that. If it has some updates, that kind of thing, we have more of a code line that comes into there, as you see with the blue, that kind of gives you an idea that we're talking about something different here. But it's pretty clean altogether. Quiet there, as Rutledge would say, as compared to maybe this. And that. What I like about this is, in fact, we can scroll it up and have it go away, but they got to make some money somehow. We have 3 columns here going, whereas on the NPR we had really 2 columns happening in terms of what's happening on the right side of promotional material. Then the content here with CNN, we have 3 columns, and then they lose their ratios to each other just beyond the page, or beyond the fold, as we might say in old newspaper lingo. And then that gets distributed a little bit more evenly as we go down, and then more banners, and everything after a while looks a little bit like clickbait as you go. And now we're down to 4 columns, and the further down we get, I think the more diverse that becomes. CBS News, I don't know what happened here because this used to be a dynamite news site to go through and pick up on information, and now it's um, pretty noisy. Even though we're just using lines and not boxes necessarily to go through and separate content, it's a jam fest as they've got it all crammed in there as we go. NBC, not a whole lot better. Working a little bit towards the horizontal movement as we go, but then it disintegrates as we go down. I have to give Fox News its due here. Same kind of things that are going on. We'll wait everything to load here, and I'm sure you'll be revealed of what it is I've been shopping for. Yes, I've been looking for a new Fujifilm camera and lights for my truck and the fridge, but that's beside the point. That doesn't scroll away, by the way. That stays there. And then we see all kinds of breaking we have in terms of how the columns are coming together. Everything's structured vertically within this. Pretty noisy. And then before you know it, you're into what looks like clickbait, but they're features and faces, or they have different categories that they're putting things in. That still, here's health. Then we get into sponsored stories, which are clickbait, travel, what to watch, and so on. And maybe that's what their audience is used to doing, used to saying with that. It gets away with it. In public broadcasting, we're greeted with a nice banner up on top. We can go through and scroll that banner and see what kind of information we want to find in terms of their programming. This is KUED is their sister station here out of Salt Lake, and so they're going to pop up. I'm going to go back to the PBS side and scroll. This is very visual. I don't know if you've seen this before, but if you happen to speak one of these languages, you can convert the whole website to that and then listen to it, their news in slow versions of the language, which I think is pretty cool. That's not a design concept, but now we're into the news. Full width banners coming up, nicely laid out. And that falls down to 3. We're going to do a reveal here, fundraisers for KUED, and then back to their content as it goes. They're very visual here, which is I'm hoping something you would expect with PBS or any type of a visual news service like any one of these stations, but we're not seeing that with them. Anyway, just to give you an idea in terms of quiet structure, what Rutledge is talking about here. If you get a chance, be sure you go through and read that. The main thing I wanted to get into here, though, is on the next page of items that I have going on. In terms of the axioms of web design, of web development, Rutledge had about 8 of them, and as I've gone through and reviewed them over the years, they really kind of boiled down to 4. 4, maybe 5 if I'll see what I've got going on here as I've put this together. The first one, the first axiom, and what I mean by axiom, I mean laws. These are things that drive web design. And as with, I think, any kind of design, the very first law ought to be, what are the communication objectives? What's the point? What is it that you're trying to do? Now, when you're developing an ad campaign, or you're putting together perhaps a converged media site, or even if you're working just in graphics or working artistically, that might be implicit in the design of what it is that you're trying to do. But in web design, it's not a bad idea to go through and make it known, put it out there, see what's going on. So I'm using PhotoSeed. This is that's a place I can waste a lot of time in looking at old photographs, which I really enjoy doing. But right up front here, they're telling us what their point is. PhotoSeed, representing an evolving online record of this early fine art photography movement, is a private archive, and so on. So that's the whole point, right? That's what they're doing this for. It's there for you to read right up front in terms of what their communication objectives are. And as Rutledge indicates, that's a pretty important design axiom. Now, if you go through and click on one of these, it'll actually come up and give you the background on it in terms of what we might call metadata that's attached to the image. And we might find related images as we go to see what's going on, or if we want to look at images that deal directly with that particular country, You can go through. That's not the reason why I spent a lot of time on the site, okay? Just so you're all understanding. If you want to look at the photographer and see what else he's done, oh, there we go again. Go back out. This is gonna. There we go. Let's see. Who else can we find here? What else looks pretty interesting? Well, I think you get the idea here of how this navigates and what it's all about. Let's try Joseph Beck and see what he comes up with. So what you see is what you get in terms of their communication objectives here with PhotoSeed. We like it a lot. The next concept is it's a worn out concept, and that is in the past that you would find some kind of call to action based on the website in the lower right hand corner. And that's an axiom that's pretty well gone by the wayside. For some reason, as we studied the way people approach websites, we would see them go from the top left and work their way down to the bottom right. And GoPro used to have, if you wanted to buy the camera and not fool around with the rest of their site, there was a spot right here in the lower right-hand side where you can go through and actually do that without having to scroll, without having to go beyond the fold, so to speak. Now, I'm working with a MacBook Air, a small one, and my fold is going to be a little higher than a full screen PC or full screen Mac's going to be. But if I scroll down a little bit more, now I'm into the shop now. And that's going to take me out to their products in terms of what's going on. GoPro is dynamic in that they're using user-generated content to go through and promote their products, which is really cool. And if you ever want to be inspired to go out and take some pictures or roll some video, all you got to do is spend about 5 minutes here, if even that, and see what it is that they're doing. It's pretty intuitive, which is the next item that I'll get into here in just a minute. In terms of shopping, what is it you want to get into? I see they brought their drone back. They brought their drone out about 2 years ago, and the things were dropping out of the sky, and so they took them off the market. It looks like they might have them reworked now. There. So anyway, here we're talking about the idea of communication objectives. Here we're talking about typically we have a call to action within the website in the lower right-hand side, but that's changed a bit. Now that call to action on the landing page that we're finding is becoming more centralized and within a scroll, just to get us down one more. And I can't help but wonder, you see how it's popping up on all those, if that doesn't generate a little bit more user metadata in terms of actually connecting, having to make that scroll, if that does something with the IP address as it connects and it drops a cookie or something there. The next concept I want to get into is this idea of some level of continuity. This is, let me reload this here and see how it goes. This is Subaru, the automobile company, is really trying hard to go through and make a connection with Earth lovers, and that's not very hard to do. It seems those are the folks who are more likely to drive Subarus, even without them becoming very Earth-centric here as it goes. The website that they have going on with this, though, is a great example of what I mean by continuity. You see as we're pushing in and pulling out here, indicating that there might be something worth taking a look at. If I'm going to click on this, it gets into these tree rings, kind of symbolic of time passing. I really like that concept of what's going on. And as I scroll through that, you can see from 1989 it comes out then to current day. And these are movements or people who had something to do along a timeline to do with Earth, from energy conservation to national park registries and so on. And you can go through and scroll through these linearly. Again, adding to that concept of continuity as we go. I spent a lot of time on this if you're really into that sort of thing, which apparently Subaru drivers and potential Subaru drivers are with that. So that's what I mean by continuity. Even the line itself, the timeline itself, gives us a sense of linearity with that in terms of continuity. Next is this idea of intuitiveness. So with vending, we had communication objectives. Here we have a call to action. Here we have continuity. With Rally Interactive, which is a design company out of Salt Lake City, and these guys are on fire. Their site is intuitive. As it comes up, let me load it so you can see how the loader works. Oh, boom. Sorry, it doesn't even need a loader as it goes. But I happen to be on the second, so it's dropped a cookie there already. This is what it comes up to, is Rally, the name of the studio. And there's really not one way. There's an arrow here indicating that if I click on that, maybe that'll take me someplace. This gets into the individuals behind that and what is they're doing. Nicely laid out. I love the back and forth with this, with what they're doing. It's nice and clean, lots of white space. The photography is well laid out. Let me go back to the top though, to the ribbon, and it did that by itself. I just didn't scroll to that. I just barely hit the top, and then it automatically folded to that ribbon. And if I go through and scroll that, it's going to make a liar out of me. So I'm grabbing it and scrolling back and forth. You see the ribbon. It just doesn't change color. It goes through and morphs into color as I go back and forth. That's pretty cool. Okay, and in fact, that kind of gets into affordance a little bit, but there's some intuition going on. So what we're seeing here is a portfolio of their work. So they did this, city guides for National Geographic, and then if I want to see them, all I have to do is scroll up, and we see the apps, the city guide apps that they developed for National Geographic, and then it gets into their backstory of these. And what I really also like about these guys is that the writing is compelling, it's funny, it's concise, it gets into some good stories, and it gives you a really nice behind the scenes of what it is that they're doing. So if you're into design, this kind of pulls back the curtain and shows you the process of what it was that they needed to do, what their challenges were, what their design concepts were, who their audience is with those. There's one more here I want to get to. This one is really amazing. The National Parks one they did for National Geographic. Again, this is an app that goes onto tablets or smart devices. And they get right into the background of how they even got the contract to go through and do this job. I love this transparency with what they're doing. I think these guys are on the money. If you're looking for an internship, let's give these guys a call and see if we can't get you involved with their work and what it is that's going on, because I think they're way ahead of the game. Rally Interactive. So I'm using these guys. I'm using this website to show you what I mean by intuitiveness. It doesn't bonk you over the head. Yeah, we got two arrows up here, and the diamond, kind of lens kind of inspires you to go to that direction, and indicates that we have at least 4 different landing pages that we can get into. We have 4 different landing pages represented here, but this kind of tells us where we're at, and then another navigation arrow there. But they might as well be transparent because, again, they don't bonk you over the head with that. I really like that a lot in terms of design and what's happening with this. That's pretty great. The last idea is this one of affordance. And the one I'm going to use for that is Eine Deiner Seite, which is a music video that gets you into what I mean by, let me give you some definitions for it. Well, first, let's review, okay? Photo seed, then communication objectives. GoPro was the call to action where that happens somewhere. It's going to happen lower. It's going to draw you into the website. Environment was continuity, the Subaru one, and the Rally Interactive being this idea that it's intuitive. Lastly, then, is Eine Deiner Seite. And I'm going to reload this one so you see how it loads. Oh, we were at the beginning of it anyway. So by affordance, what I mean by that is that it draws you into it. It's going to envelop you and get you involved, and not just from a standpoint of user involvement, like playing the game or like what we saw with Voyeur. This gets us a little bit more interactive, and it's happening on 2 different levels. So it's showing you hold the space bar to start. If you want to start the song, I'm going to hit the space bar, and it brings us into So I've let go of the space bar, and it's brought us back to then the main play of the video. But if I hit it again, and it's doing this spontaneously, wherever, it takes us out to the other video that's rolling simultaneously with this.
Der Föhn spurt zurück, das Blut in meinen Adern wird langsam kalt, all die Stimmen werden leiser.
So I've hit it again. It's giving us more clues of what those clues have to do with the murder that this guy ends up investigating.
Weil das Loslassen leichter, ich spür die Schmerzen wie durch Filter, hör nur den Mond, wie mich ruft, und wenn man mich verzweifelt.
I've hit it again there so you can see what's going on. And go back and forth. So I can toggle back and forth like that. You see what's going on. Pretty fascinating. And I'm going to stop this so you can hear me talk instead of hear that. It's a great song. It's really cool in what it is they're doing. And obviously the combinations of toggling back and forth in this will go through and not only entertain you in terms of the story, because it's compelling, but you're not going to forget the song either by the time you're done, which is, I'm sure, part of their communication objectives in pulling this together. Pretty cool, I have to say, in terms of affordance. If I'm going to spend a lot of time with a computer, which I'm trying not to do these days, this is a nice way to go through and pull me in. Maybe it's going to do that with you. That's what affordance does. Is it not only is it intuitive, there's some continuity happening here. None of these are mutually exclusive. They all end up with some level of both cognitive and affective consequences to us in order to listen to more, or I want to download the album, or I want to buy a Subaru, or it's time to go get that GoPro, whatever that case might be, to see what's happening. So those ideas I want you to maybe apply here in a little exercise that I'll get into here in just a minute. But the concept of the communication objectives, I keep forgetting what I'm calling that. It's the call to action, where that's happening at. What's going on in terms of continuity, the intuitiveness of it, and then the affordance there. Oh, I just made it do something as it's going. So the last thing I have on here, and I have a link to this on the page that this video is going to go on as well, is what are the new trends that we're looking at? And I think I'd have to agree with most of these as we get into this. So I want you to read this as well, 18 Web Design Trends for 2017. It gets into each one are slugged that way as we go along. And I think we're making some big strides in design and the complexity of design, what that has to do with maintaining people involved in websites without having them bounce away. So let me come back to the class page. And so the default page will be this, Axioms of Web Design. Now that this video is done, I'm going to go through and format it and upload it to YouTube. And it's going to appear right up here. So what I want you to do is obviously watch the video in lieu of class, and then go through and read this article, and then read the other one on quiet structure with Skip Rutledge. Okay? We'll see you on Thursday.